Thanks very much for joining me. In the midst of these crazy, unprecedented, and dangerous times, I want to say a few words about what I and other progressives have been up to recently. And frankly, it is a lot. First, some very good news. Just this last Thursday, Ana Lilia Mejia won a landslide victory to become the Congresswoman from the 11th District of New Jersey. Now, what was important about her victory is not just that Ana Lilia is a strong progressive, a grassroots organizer, and someone who played a major role in my 2020 presidential campaign. That's important. But what's more important is that the district she won was not considered to be particularly progressive. In other words, what Ana Lilia's victory showed is that at a time of massive income and wealth inequality and deep discontent with status quo politics, our progressive analysis and progressive vision is gaining more and more traction in all parts of our society. In other words, we can win anywhere. So let me just thank Ana Lilia for her great campaign and thank many of you for the support that you gave her. Another important development. Last Wednesday, I and other progressives in the Senate took a major step forward in reversing one of the ugliest and most dangerous aspects of American foreign policy. As many of you know, I have for several years been trying to stop our government from sending military aid to Israel, a nation which, under the leadership of right-wing extremist Benjamin Netanyahu, has committed genocide in Gaza, started an illegal and horrific war in Iran, and has been bombing civilian neighborhoods in Lebanon, should not be supported by U.S. tax dollars. Now, when we began this effort several years ago, the first resolution that I offered to stop U.S. military aid to Israel received only 11 votes in the Senate. The next resolution received 18 votes, followed by a resolution that won 27 votes. Last Wednesday, a resolution that I offered received 40 votes, over 80% of the Democratic caucus, an all-time high. We received no Republican support. The simple truth is that when working people are struggling to put food on the table and pay for housing and health care, they do not want billions of their hard-earned tax dollars to be spent on killing innocent people in the Middle East. And the Democratic establishment is, belatedly, to be sure, they are now catching on. Bottom line, we are making progress in this vitally important area, but much more needs to be done. We must continue pushing forward to stop these never-ending and illegal wars. We must end U.S. military aid to Israel. We are also making progress in another area of extraordinary consequence. Artificial intelligence and robotics are the most transformational technologies in the history of humanity. They are going to impact the lives of you and every other person in our country. And I got to tell you, Congress is way behind in terms of protecting the American people from the negative impacts these technologies will have. These revolutionary developments, pushed by the wealthiest people in the world, we're talking about a handful of multi-billionaires who are pushing these technologies. These could result in the loss of tens of millions of jobs, could completely eviscerate our privacy, and negatively impact the education and mental health of our kids. Further, there are very knowledgeable scientists who worry that if AI becomes smarter than human beings, it could operate independently of human control with perhaps catastrophic results. That is not science fiction. That is what some leading scientists believe to be the case. Recently, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I introduced legislation calling for a moratorium on the construction of new data centers. And the reason for that is that the data centers are the infrastructure for AI. And our legislation imposes a moratorium until guidelines and regulations are established that protect workers and every American from the dangers of AI and robotics. This idea is gaining momentum all across the country, in conservative areas, in progressive areas. Local communities are voting down the construction of data centers, and many cities and states are now considering moratoriums. Just a few days ago, the state legislature in Maine became the first state in the nation to pass a moratorium to prevent the construction of data centers. Bottom line, the American people increasingly understand that these revolutionary technologies, AI and robotics, have got to improve life for all of us, not just make the richest people in the world even richer. I understand that these are very difficult and stressful times for the people of our country, and especially for our younger generation. Given the conditions under which we are living, it is very easy to feel despair and even helplessness. That is a natural reaction to what is going on today. It's a natural reaction to the pathological lying of Donald Trump, to his illegal wars, to his authoritarianism, his narcissism and mental instability, and his contempt for the Constitution and the rule of law. But despair and helplessness is exactly what we do not have the luxury of allowing. For the sake of our kids and future generations, we must fight back. Further, I hope all of you understand that the agenda that we are fighting for is the agenda that the American people want. In the richest country in the history of the world, ordinary Americans understand that health care is a human right, not a privilege, that every worker is entitled to a decent standard of living and a secure retirement, that all of our kids should enjoy a world-class education without going into debt, that we must address the crisis of income and wealth inequality, and that the rich must start paying their fair share of taxes, among many other issues. And let me conclude by sharing some very positive developments. In case you haven't noticed, the resistance that together we have been mounting against Trumpism and oligarchy is succeeding on many, many fronts. Trump's poll numbers are plummeting. The American people are catching on to the fraud that he is. And there is a very real likelihood that Democrats will gain control over the House in the 2026 elections, and a growing possibility that Democrats may even win the Senate. Further, our progressive movement is expanding. A number of strong progressives running for the Senate and the House have excellent chances of winning. And in the next few months, I look forward to campaigning with some of these great candidates in Michigan, Ohio, Minnesota, Maine, and elsewhere. Thank you all very much for what you do. What you know and I know is that real change never takes place from the top on down. It is always from the bottom on up through grassroots activism. That is what we are doing. That's what we have got to continue doing. Let us go forward together. Thank you all very much.